people, when they're doing UI in Unreal Engine, they like to use these widget blueprints, and there's really nothing wrong with them. They're actually awesome. Like, the fact that you can drag and drop and design stuff is really handy. But sometimes you might want to do UI in C++. Maybe you want more performance, or maybe you want features that aren't available to widget blueprints. Well, today, what I'm going to show you how to do is basically make UI in C++. So this is not a widget blueprint. This is all done in C++. And you can see we can quit the game, we can play the game. I don't have a settings menu implemented, but I'm going to show you how to create this basic menu, and we'll be doing this all in Slate, which is Unreal Engine's C++ UI framework. And that's actually what the widget blueprints are built on top of. So let's get into it. Guys, I just want to mention the Unreal Engine survival game course is up on the Patreon now. We're here in the testing level, and this is actually where we develop the entire game. We create an interaction system with pickups, a true first-person camera. We have a fully modular character that comes with the course, and we make a modular clothing system to go with it. We have an interaction system. For example, lamps that can be turned on and off. Everything is networked, by the way. Lootable chests. The game is also open world, and you can play it with other people, and we show you how to actually deploy the game on a dedicated server and launch it with Steam. So if you're interested, the link will be in the description. You can buy the course, unsubscribe, and you'll still have lifetime access. Anyways, back to the video. So as always, we're going to start off in the Unreal Project browser. We're going to go new project, and we want a C++ project, obviously, because we're using C++ today. And it's really up to you what one of these you want to go for. I'm going to go for third person, but it really should not matter. And so we're going to call this menu, and then we can click on create project. Okay, so before we can even touch the Slate code, we're going to implement some classes here. So we'll start with a HUD class. If you search for HUD, I'm just going to make a class called menu HUD. HUD kind of acts as the manager for putting widgets up on the screen. So we need a HUD class, and we also need a player controller class as well, because I'm going to make it that when you press the escape key, it's going to kind of put the pause menu up on the screen. So we'll right click, new C++ class, go down to player controller, and just add a player controller. I'm going to call my one menu player controller, and we'll click on create class. So how do we make a piece of Slate UI? What we're going to do is we're going to go new C++ class, and you actually don't want to choose a parent class. That's because all the Slate stuff doesn't appear in this menu. For whatever reason, maybe Epic just forgot about it, but you actually want to select none. We have to do it manually instead. And so we're going to call this S main menu widget. And whenever you're creating a Slate widget, you want to put an S before it. Similar to how we put like a F before a struct or U before a U object. So let's go ahead and click on create class, and then I'll show you how to actually turn this empty class into a Slate class. So inside of Visual Studio, if you expand UE4 and go to source and then go to like runtime, you don't have to do this, but I'm just showing you. There is a module in here called Slate. And if we try to use the Slate features without including these modules, Unreal Engine's basically just going to be like, what the hell is Slate? What are you talking about? But if we include it, then Unreal will know what Slate is. And so the way that we do this is we actually go into our build file. So you want to open up menu.build.cs, and we're going to go under here and just say private dependency module names, add range, new string, and then just add Slate and Slate core to there. And now when we build, basically Unreal is going to actually know about these modules. Otherwise, we're just going to get a bunch of errors and your code's not going to compile. So let's go to sMainMenuWidget.h, and then we'll actually start to implement some stuff. So we really don't need the core minimal thing, and we don't need this API tag here. And we're going to include a couple of Slate header files here. So let's do that. And now we need to talk about compound widget. So you want your main menu to inherit from compound widget. If you right click on this, go to definition. You don't have to do this. Again, this is just an example. You can see here it says a compound widget is the base from which most non-primitive widgets should be built. A primitive widget is something like a button or a text box. So basically, if you're not making something like that, you want to use compound widget as the base for your widget. And so that is why we are using compound widget for the base class of our main menu widget. Now, whenever we define a Slate widget, we might want to take some arguments to be passed into the Slate widget. And in my case, I'm going to get a reference to my HUD inside of my widget. And that's because that way I can get a reference to the world and stuff like that I just wouldn't be able to do otherwise. I wouldn't be able to quit the game or play the game, stuff like that just wouldn't work without getting a reference to my HUD. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have Slate begin args, and then you can just put your Slate arguments in. And this might be confusing to you now, but this is just a system for passing information to the HUD. And so I'm basically just saying, hey, I want to pass in the menu HUD class into my widget here. Next, I'm just going to get rid of the constructor and the destructor, and we're going to actually use this void construct event. We're going to add a variable that stores my menu HUD. You might be wondering why we don't do it like we usually would, which is just to have a raw pointer to a menu HUD like that. And the reason is because the compound widget, the Slate widgets, they're not UObjects, and they don't actually get registered for garbage collection. And so you have to kind of manage memory yourself. So what we're doing is we're just caching an object pointer, and then basically this is not going to count as a reference because it's a weak pointer. I'm not going to go super in depth here, but just know that we need to do it a little bit differently because we don't have garbage collection with these widgets. We're going to override the supports keyboard focus function. Basically, this just tells our widget that it can support keyboard focus. If you don't do this and then you try to focus a widget, you get this really annoying error message. So just add this in here and then you won't get that message. So now I'm going to implement my construct function, and we'll get rid of the constructor and the destructor. And I'm going to show you how to use the construct function. This is where you actually construct your UI. So you basically build your UI in here. And if you haven't done any Slate before, you're probably going to be like, what the hell is this? But the good news is the more you use Slate, once you're familiar with it, it's actually like pretty cool. Like it's pretty simple. And I hated it when I started using it, but the more I use it, the more I like it. And so basically the compound widget has a child slot. And this is where we put all of our UI. So we're going to start by defining a overlay. This is a widget that lets you overlay different things on top of each other. And then we're going to add a slot to the overlay, and we're going to put stuff inside of it. This is the exact same thing as what you're doing in blueprints when you drag and drop the UI into your blueprint. We're just doing it in C++ now. So into my overlay slot, I'm going to add a image. I'm not going to actually set the image. I'm just going to set it to be the color black. And this will just give me a nice background. So this is how you actually get the background to show up. And let's also add a vertical box, because I'm going to put all my buttons inside a vertical box so that they're nicely arranged and they look nice. So let's see here. Let's just define a variable called content padding. So this is how much padding my buttons are going to have on the side of them. And you'll be able to see this more clearly when we go into the editor. So we're going to add a slot to our overlay. So we're adding another slot. And the worst part of this is the tabbing. Visual Studio like screws up the tabbing and it looks really bad, but I'm just going to fix this. Okay. So in here, we're going to put a vertical box. So you use this snew to create a new widget, and then we're adding a slot to that vertical box. And in there, we're going to put a block of text. So basically, we'll just go through new text block, and we're going to put some text in it like this. And I've made this variable called title text. So let's go up here. I'm just going to say the title text is going to be my super great game. And I'm using this loc text thing. Let me explain what this is, because this is super cool. So we'll define a loc text namespace. And then we will undefine loc text namespace at the bottom. So this is Unreal Engine's localization system. So once you get people translating your game to like Russian or French or whatever, you use this key, and then Unreal Engine does all the work for you, and it will replace this text saying my super great game. It will replace that with the French equivalent or the Russian equivalent or whatever. So this is how you do localization in your game. So if we add this UI to the screen right now, we're going to have a black screen, and it's going to have some text that says my super great game. We don't have any buttons, we don't have anything like that. But what I thought we'd do is just add this to the screen just to show you how to do it. So let's tackle the problem of how do we add HUD to the screen. We'll start by going to the menu game mode and add the player controller class and the HUD class. You will have to add the header files for those as well. So inside of our HUD, we're going to add a protected section. Basically, we're going to store a reference to the menu itself, and then the menu is going to be contained within this container, and we use the container to remove and add the menu to the screen. And so let's go to create implementation, and we'll add the begin play function. We're going to call super begin play. And let me explain how this works. It's pretty ugly, the code to add something to the screen. But what we need to do before we even do that is add our header files. So we're going to add these, and we also need to add engine.h, and this is because you need to get the global engine pointer to actually add something to the screen. So what you do is you say if engine and engine game viewport, then we're going to create our menu widget. And the way that we do that is we use snew, because remember that our widget is just a Slate widget. So we just use snew to make it. And then we do main menu widget. And then how we pass variables in is you actually just do dot and then owning HUD. And we're actually just passing ourselves into the widget. So now our widget knows about the HUD class. And that's important because it lets us access the world and do stuff that we wouldn't be able to do otherwise. Okay, so now we grab the game engine viewport. And this is where things get a little bit ugly looking, but just bear with me here. So it is add viewport widget content. And then instead of using snew, we're going to use something called sassign new. This is the exact same as snew, but it lets you store it in a variable. So we're doing menu widget container. This is the container for the widget. And we're creating a weak widget. And then there's a function possibly null content. This is what we're passing into the container. So we're saying menu widget. And then this function, it takes a shared ref. And we have a shared pointer. So what we have to do is to shared ref. And then that should work. Okay, so I just clicked on the local Windows debugger, so I've opened the editor up, and if all goes well, when I hit play, I get a black screen and I get the text, my super great game. So obviously, this is not very great, this is nothing special, but we're going to tidy it up and add some styling and add some buttons and stuff like that. The main thing is, we know that it now works. So yeah, let's go back into the code and we'll keep working on adding some buttons and stuff like that. So in my construct function, I'm just going to define all of the text that I'll need for my various buttons and register them with the localization system so that we can change between different languages later on if we wanted to do that. We're also going to cache a reference to the owning HUD that got passed in. The way that you do that is you actually just say owning HUD and then you can grab it from the in args that came into the widget. We also want to set can support focus to true. This is similar to what I was showing you here. It just avoids a really annoying error message that we would otherwise get. We're also going to give our buttons some padding, so we'll define the button padding up here. And if you remember, we had that awful looking text. It was really small, hard to see. It just looked really bad. What we're going to do is we're going to grab the core engine style and get the embossed text font. So this is kind of outside the scope of this video, but basically you define all the styling in something called a Slate style. And I'm not going to go into it in this video, but basically the engine has one already made, and it has something in it called embossed text. And then what we're doing here is we're just making the title text a little bit bigger than the text that appears on the buttons. So that's all we're doing there. So coming back to our title text, I'm just going to change it to have these new parameters. So we're going to use that new font. And then I've also set the justification to center. This is basically just like the alignment of the title. And I think it's really important because this can get quite messy to add comments. So I'm just going to say title text, and then let's go ahead and add some more things. So let's add our buttons now. We'll do that. So underneath this slot, I'm going to add another slot. So this is going to be our play button. And basically you just say what you want to put in the slot. And in our case, we just want to put a button in. So that's how we do it. And on the button, I want to put some text. So I'm going to put a text block inside of that button. So now if you go to where it says play button and you just copy and paste that 2 times, that's going to add 2 more buttons in. And so this is getting a little bit messy because Visual Studio does not like the indenting. But we can go through ourselves and fix that. Okay, and then I'm just going to change these comments. So I'm going to have a settings button and I'm going to have a quit button. So as long as you spread these slots out a little bit, it's quite readable. I mean, you can see here, here's the title, here's my play button, here's my settings button, and here's my quit button. So it's actually like, it's not terribly hard to read. And this is kind of what I mean. The more that you play around with this, the more you get used to Slate. It's actually not as bad as when you first look at it, because it's kind of a nightmare when you're first using it. But for my settings button, I don't want to use the play text. I want to use the settings text. And then I also want to use the quit text for my quit button. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to set your buttons up to actually do something when you click on them. So we're going to add these 2 functions here, on play clicked and on quit clicked. And then we're going to create implementations for both of these functions. Okay, so to bind our buttons to actually do something when we click on them, you just add the on clicked event to the S button. So we're going to add the play one, and then we're going to add one for the quit as well. Oops. We want to add that to the button. Okay, so if you were to do a log in here like that, and you put some log information in here, this would show up when you click on the button. But I'm not going to bother doing that because I know that it already works. So let's do the quit functionality. I'll show you how to do quit. So what we're going to do is we'll say that if the owning HUD is valid, grab our player controller from the HUD and then execute a console command quit. And this will just quit from the game. So let's go ahead and include all the files we need. So make sure that you include these 2 header files, and then this code down here should now work without any issues. Finally, you need to return a reply, and I'm just going to return if reply handled. There are other types of replies. For example, you can detect if the button was dragged, stuff like that. But generally, most of the time, if you've handled the functionality, you can just go ahead and return handled. So with that done, I'm going to run the local Windows debugger, and let's see if our game quits when I click on the quit button. And make sure the onPlay clicked returns handled as well, otherwise your code will not compile. So you can see that when we click on play, our menu comes up, looks pretty good. We could use an overlay to center the text vertically on the buttons, but I don't really care all that much. But you can see if we click on quit game, it quits, and play and settings don't do anything. So let's go ahead and set up play to actually do something now. So we're going to make the play button remove the HUD from the screen, and we'll make it that if you press escape, it puts the HUD back up on the screen. So I'm just going to show you as an example so you guys know how to remove HUD and stuff like that. So we're going to add a couple of functions here, show menu and remove menu. And we'll implement both of these. Go ahead and copy this code and just drop it into the show menu. And then on begin play, just call the show menu function. Next, we're just going to add these 2 lines, which basically just say, we can only click on the UI and we should show our mouse cursor. So that's going to stop us from moving our player around in the game, even though the UI is on the screen. And so we'll add an include so that we can use all this stuff. So we're going to add the HUD and player controller. And in fact, you shouldn't need HUD. You should need player controller. So we're going to add player controller. Now to remove the menu from the screen, we're going to check the game viewport again, and we're going to check if our menu widget is valid. And we might also want to check if our menu widget container is valid. In fact, we should probably just do that instead. And so if that's the case, what we want to do is we want to remove the menu from the screen. So we just use the remove widget content function. And then we want to set the focus back to the game. And the way that we do that is by saying set input mode game only. In my player controller, I'm just going to add a few functions here so that when I press the escape key, it's going to actually open the HUD. And my CPP file is going to look like this. We've got an empty constructor. I'm binding the open menu function to this input that we'll create in a second. And we need to include that header file. And yeah, basically when you press the escape key, we're just going to call the show menu function. Let's go back to on play clicked. And basically when you click on the play button, I'm just going to remove the menu from the screen. So I know that this menu isn't very spectacular, but I'm literally just using this as a means to show you guys how to use Slate. So what I've done is I'm running a debugger, and then we're going to make the input so that we can press escape and the HUD will come back up on the screen. All right, we're going to come to edit, project settings, and input. And then we're going to make a open menu input. You can bind this to whatever you want, but I think escape is a pretty good option. And then hit play. You can hit play, that'll take it off the screen. And if you press escape, it will quit the game. But if you press shift escape, it'll act as if you pressed escape. So there you go. You can remove and add the HUD from the screen. It does all the UI and input focusing. Notice that if I move my mouse around, it's not actually controlling the camera, so the input's working as we'd expect. The quick game works as you'd expect. And so there you go. That's how to do UI in pure C++ with Slate. You notice we didn't do any blueprints in this whole video, so that's pretty cool. Nice little milestone. Learn how to use Slate in C++. This is really useful to know if you're trying to write custom editor tools. And it is also useful if you're trying to access features that aren't available to widget blueprints. But anyways, that's the end of this video. So if you want to see more Slate stuff, leave a comment. And also, if you want to see some CryEngine stuff, leave a comment, because I might do some CryEngine tutorials. Not sure on that one. But anyways, guys, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.